accurate citizens' education contributes exponentially to the overcoming of corruption and underdevelopment. Firstly, it is necessary to clarify that drafting is based on education, politics, and economy, which means that without those three factors, corruption becomes almost non existent. Having that in mind, it can be possible to accept that education is the most important of the three. This because it's thanks to education that economy and politics exist.
Besides that, corruption defends itself from possible threats. Knowing that education is the biggest one, corruption takes care of it in a way in which education cannot be done correctly. This by setting obstacles in its way. It can be seen in an example that happened here in Colombia in 2015. I quote, "The Ministry of Education paid the Corporación de Paz y Futuro 10,000 million pesos for 7,612 children that do not exist. Mineducación proved that almost 19% of these children are non-existent."
Said event leads to accept that corruption defends itself through hindering education, which makes clearer that education is the best way to defeat corruption.
It becomes necessary to take into account that humans, especially Colombians, have an education that is based on individualism, as illustrated by William Ospina. I quote, "Any Colombian knows it. Here, nothing serves for a public purpose. Here, only personal interests exist." Knowing that Colombians are individualistic people due to their education as a society, therefore corrupt, the only way to battle it is by improving the only reason that it exists, the education.
It is possible to confirm that education from today is centered in individualism, like said by Martín Valdivieso in an interview done by the Departamento de Educación, who said that in current education there is a centered attention forward to the training of producers and consumers, and that for this education there is no need to learn about social justice, common benefit, or social solidarity, which shows that nowadays education is a friendly environment in which corruption can take place and grow exponentially.
When an education is based on collaborative work and equality, corruption cannot take place. Like said by Martin, and I quote, "Corruption feeds itself from discriminatory practices. In countries with minimum corruption, education is public. Therefore, business people's kids and construction workers' kids go to the same schools," which can point to the idea that it's thanks to this education that there is no corruption in said countries. To completely cover the type of education needed, teaching teamwork, not winning as me but as we, understanding the other and taking his needs as mine, understanding his insecurities, helping the other when they need it, this kind of education in every single citizen makes a society that cares about the other. In other words, not individualist, therefore not corrupt.
As said before, it can be confirmed because, according to international transparency, the most developed countries like Denmark, Finland, Singapore, Sweden, Switzerland, Norway, and some more, in which education is described before, not leaving out the knowledge needed from school, which means that a good education leads to a country's way out of underdevelopment. All this meaning that if there was no corruption, there would be development. Colombia will be taken as an example, for corruption prevents development in every possible area. Here, it will be viewed from mining, and how corruption in this area affects Colombia's society and its growth.
An example will be used. In said example, according to Semana, Ingiomenas gave mining permissions to anyone who turned into a topography loop, an ID, and covered the cost of a pin. A pool of political manipulations and insider trading was discovered, and that, according to Semana, national and international companies started to apply for permissions, and that up to today they handed 9,000 titles, which correspond to more than 4% of the territory, and 20,000 more were pending, which were 20% of the national territory, and so a lot were in strategical places and environmental zones. Having this in mind, by this date, Ingiominas had to supervise more than $40 billion that are supposed to come in from mining in the last 10 years, meaning that this kind of money is vulnerable to corrupted people and organizations, therefore affecting the country's economy, resources, and its society.
Apart from the economic downside, there is a lot of environmental damage due to this event, like said by Genovia. The Páramo de Pisba in Boyacá was affected by mining that was never supposed to happen there, and explained that mining causes huge environmental damages, and I quote, "Earth crust destruction, water contamination, damages to fauna and flora, flora, and various effects on people's health.
It can be confirmed that corruption in this area affects economically and environmentally a country like Colombia. And it also affects socially. It literally affects people, like it is said by Joinoa. It kills people and it raises child mortality by 18%. So corruption in this area leads to damages in said cases, economically, environmentally, and socially.
It needs to be affirmed that education does beat corruption, therefore underdevelopment. If, let's say, hypothetically, Colombia had an education based in equality and from the human side, Colombia wouldn't have cases like the one exposed before from Ingeominas, meaning that those $40 billion wouldn't be open for grabs to corrupt. Therefore, it could be invested in better roads, better school, better life quality, the children mortality rate wouldn't be as high, the environment wouldn't be affected, in general, mining wouldn't be affected, meaning that it could be assumed that no area would be affected. Nothing economically, socially, politically, and environmentally, all because education prevented corruption from existing, which leads to a good development. So, if it is as easy as changing the education, why hasn't Colombia done it?